In a recent poll, I asked you all to tell me what the most difficult thing in Apex is. I received a lot of good feedback, but the majority of you voted that game sense is what makes Apex so hard. Now, I totally understand why that was voted for the most. Game sense is a tough thing to grasp. There's so many variables going on, and it has a whole lot of nuance, especially in battle royales. So in this video, I will be giving you 4 of my best tips so that you can improve your game sense quickly. But first, before I do that, I'd like to thank today's video sponsor, Epic Games. Now, lots of you know Fortnite is one of the most premier battle royales out there right now. However, the game has changed. Recently, they introduced a permanent zero build game mode. This mode is a pure test of gun skill and movement. You no longer have to worry about the crazy building and editing mechanics if you don't want to. Instead, you have the recharging overshield as your first line of defense in zero build. The gameplay is pretty simple. Use cover, use zip lines or mantling to reach and maintain high ground, and this allows for you to focus on more strategic ways to outplay your opponents. You can incorporate a lot of the things you have learned from other BR shooters and apply them to Fortnite Zero Build. This game mode is here to stay. It's honestly refreshing and super fun because it's all run and gun. There's sprinting, sliding, core gun mechanics. I mean, it's all there. You can even play this in a solos mode. You don't ever have to deal with random teammates again while playing this. If you head over to the Discover page, you will see Zero Build available in solos, duos, trios, and squads permanently. So whether you take this new mode on solo or you grab some of your friends to squad up with, I suggest you drop in today and try to get your first victory royale in Fortnite Zero Build. I mean, I think it's pretty fitting that this video is centered around game sense, and that's exactly what you're going to need in this new Zero Build mode. Check out the link in the description to learn more about Fortnite Zero Build. Thanks again to Epic Games for sponsoring this video. The first tip is about focusing on the right things. See, Apex demands a lot of our attention game to game. The more you play and improve, the more you will realize all of the things that need to be constantly evaluated. So let's talk about a handful of aspects that I keep my eyes on every game. I'm watching everything on my screen at all times. The mini-map, where I am on the map. I assess the specific POI or area that I'm in. I'm keeping in mind where the circle is pulling to and where I am in respect to that. Of course, if you're in a fight, that info may be secondary, but it's about keeping it in the back of your mind because maybe getting to zone instead of forcing that fight is going to be the smarter move in those late game scenarios. Next would be my inventory. I'm super aware of what I have and what I need. I'm not aimlessly searching for loot. I know what I'm looking for if I come across it. The degree of what I have for loot gauges how I take fights. If I don't have ammo to burn, I'm not trying to waste any in a poking battle. Next would be my teammates. If I'm solo queuing, I'm hyper aware of my teammates' health and shield bar, along with where they are in reference to me and where I think enemies are. If you play with a squad, some of this can be bridged with voice communications, but not all of it. Sometimes players misinterpret what should be their main focus. They can be worried about secondary things instead of focusing on the primary threat at hand, and this will fluctuate throughout the game. But things such as audio and visual cues during the match will elaborate on information that you need to process. This could range from gunshots to legend abilities and voice line quips. It's kind of crazy because when I was new to this game, I was really just focused on shooting my gun and trying to remember to use one of my abilities. But the more I've played and improved, the more I realize I need to pay attention to just about everything going on. And if I miss something, that could result in my death or me not being prepared correctly. Tip number 2 is be aware of your surroundings. This sounds obvious, right? Well, yeah, it kind of is. But the reality is sometimes players don't even consider the geography they're on. They don't look for the angles or power positions in a fight. They may inadvertently go low ground as they rotate, when taking the high ground route is a better preventative measure. A simple example for me would be if I'm solo queuing and getting shot at from some opponents on high ground. I immediately consider the whole team's line of sight on me. I assess the cover I'm near and start playing around that. From there, I can then create a better plan to take on that fight, or potentially leave it. See, abusing cover is something that every top tier player does, and honestly, I've been seeing a lot more players in my games utilizing it, and this will always make fighting someone more difficult. You should be processing the info you're learning from being aware of your surroundings, then trying to make a calculated decision as a team off of that info. It's a lot of little things in Apex that usually make the difference between staying alive and dying. But there's a big difference between knowing the path and walking the path. In other words, knowing something and actually doing it are 2 totally different things. Tip number 3, eliminate tunnel vision. This is what hangs up most players in Apex, whether they are new or not. To play off my last point about Apex requiring a lot of our attention, it's vital to keep in mind what's the most important thing moment to moment. So here's a couple examples of how players tunnel vision in Apex. Let's say they're in a fight with a team that has some distance in between them, about 30 to 50 meters or so. So they deal some damage, but also take some damage. The fight ends up getting closer, and the player just continues to look for damage dealing opportunities instead of healing, and then re-peeking. Because they wasted time not healing, by the time the enemy closes the gap, the player is extremely vulnerable with their total health and shield count. The opponent had already healed and ends up getting the best of them. Don't let tunnel vision prevent you from healing when you take damage, or from repositioning slightly off your opponent's moves. Another example I see from coaching that is super common is, let's say you get an opponent weak, but you completely tunnel vision on where their teammates are. As you progress forward, trying to secure your knock, that player's teammates beam you, and you get knocked. Some people would say, man, I thought he was just a solo, which is usually a shortcoming, because rarely is it ever just a solo, especially in the normal trios or ranked mode. Sometimes, even though we get someone weak, following up on it needs to account for where we believe their teammates are. The threats can change quickly. 1 second it's one person, 3 seconds later it's another person who has become the bigger threat. I always try to build a narrative or paint a picture of where I think all 3 opponents are, and this is critical for gathering info. You also want to use this to your advantage when you see an opponent caught out in isolation. Now remember, the opponent doesn't need to be close up in order for your team to punish that enemy for being split. You all can work different angles on that guy or pounce together depending on the circumstances. You have to constantly assess this in your games. Tunnel vision is something that needs to be corrected in order for you to flourish in any shooter game. The 4th tip to improve game sense centers around getting in more reps. Now I know we all have a limited amount of time that we can play. We've got school, work, etc. But that's okay. It's just important to keep in mind for perspective. Improvement can take a while. That's just how it goes. But if you make the time you do have line up with what you're trying to improve on, it can seriously go a long way. That's been my experience, and I've seen it from a lot of the players I've coached as well. Regardless of where you are at in terms of skill, you have to get used to all of the natural and common reoccurring things in this battle royale. There's a ton of variables going on at all times. Legends, maps, weapons, new metas. A lot of the improvement will come simply from being able to identify what sort of situation you're in and what to do as a result of that. This is why getting experience is necessary. As you progress through the ranks in this game, your focus will shift. The things gold players have to keep in mind is different than the diamond player trying to reach masters. Of course, there's some overlap there, but the situations will come at different paces due to the different competition. Getting reps in and trying to learn from mistakes can go a long way, and I always recommend trying to look back at your gameplay to see if you find any glaring mistakes. This can be done on any platform with minimal effort, and it's the same thing professional athletes do after their games. They rewatch the footage to see what they're doing right and wrong. The more aware you become, the more choices you'll realize you have in Apex. Now that you've learned everything about game sense, if you're interested in how to improve your aim, I suggest you click on this video here. Thanks for watching. Peace.